Welcome to Success in Brief with your host, Rosanne Felicello. In every episode, we feature successful women attorneys and other business professionals to reflect on what career advice would you give your younger self. We hope to provide insights and inspiration toward your professional success. You can find this show at www.felicellolaw.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Success in Brief, Rosanne Felicello.
Good morning. My name is Rosanne Felicello, and this is Success in Brief. I'm thrilled to welcome Kristen Leibensperger to today's podcast. Kristen and I met as colleagues at Patterson-Belknap 16 years ago, where we were both associates in the litigation department. We both eventually left Patterson and hung our own shingles, and although our legal careers then went in different directions, as we'll discuss today, we've managed to remain good friends and find ways to work together professionally. I'm so excited to introduce you to Kristen and share her story of success. Kristen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Rosanne.
We met as litigation associates, but now you primarily practice intellectual property and corporate law, and you've also been adding some expertise in alternative dispute resolution. How does your career today compare to what you imagine it would look like as a law student?
I think it's completely different. If I trace threads back through, I see how I got here. I always really liked intellectual property law. I thought it was interesting and exciting to kind of work with, the idea of brands and entertainment content and literary content. And then I also always was really interested in negotiation and dispute resolution in law school when I was able to take those classes. But then I kind of just went the really traditional path and straight out of law school, going into, working firm life. And I thought litigation was where, I was going to thrive. And anyway, I was still learning along the way. It was definitely kind of like a honing down process of what I find interesting.
I think that's true for most of us. A career doesn't really look at like what you thought it was going to be as you were sitting in your 1L class in law school.
Yeah, absolutely that.
And I think career services often push people to the more traditional route of going big law, going litigation, or one of those, paths of litigation or corporate as coming out of law school. And you, at that point, you don't really know what you're interested in, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, practicing as an young associate in a firm, even my first year I actually worked at a small firm. I chose a small firm because I wanted to do something, because I'd been a paralegal and a summer associate at big firms and thought small firms were going to suit me better. But even in my first small firm in Chicago, and then at the Patterson-Belknap in New York, it's nothing like law school. You're learning like the trade part of the skill. So it's like you're learning literally what to do in the beginning of cases, and sometimes a very, very like tiny corner of the case that you're working on, versus kind of like the big ideas and the foundational reasoning that you studied in law school. So it was very different. I think I learned a lot, but it was just a totally new process of thinking about law and how it, your part in it, I guess.
And it's interesting that you mentioned it being very different from what you learned in law school, because the bar exam was just across the country administered last week for most people. And the bar exam really tests a lot of what you learn in law school, not what you're going to be practicing as a lawyer, but you need to take it to practice as an attorney.
The bar exam has always confused me because it's malpractice for someone to come into your office and for you to say, I know the answer to that. This is what you should do, instead of looking it up and researching it and making sure that it didn't change yesterday, or it didn't change, the whole idea that you're supposed to memorize all these things about law and then like regurgitate them doesn't make any sense, because that's absolutely not what you should do when you're a lawyer. Anyway.
Exactly.
It's a very strange, I guess, threshold that attorneys in this country and each state have a reason to kind of gatekeep, I guess.
And you've taught for 3 different bar exams, right? Illinois, Massachusetts, and then later New York. Is that right?
And in New York, yes. I didn't know where I wanted to live, so I found it very stressful to like decide where. So I went to Northwestern, and so I was in Chicago. That's where I had accepted a job for first year, so I knew I was going to do that. But then my family's from Boston, and I was kind of feeling like, I don't know if I'm going to stay in Illinois forever. So I flew, took the Illinois bar in 2 days, and then got on a plane, flew to Boston, took the next day in Boston, because like one of those days like doubled or something. Mm-hmm. And then 2 years later, decided to move to New York and took the New York bar. So it was, I don't know, it was probably not worth my time, but I really was worried about being kind of like pigeonholed into one state. And I figured like once I was studying for it, I might as well just try to, get as many as I could.
And did you have the experience of needing to restudy for the New York bar exam before?
I did a little, but I didn't do, I think I did a class for the first one. I can't totally remember, but I think there was like a prep class and like stuff that people did. Maybe I'm wrong. I can't really picture
Barbary?
It, what?
Maybe Barbary?
Yeah, is that what everyone did?
Yeah, I think everyone did.
Anyway, so for New York, I didn't do that. I just like bought a book.
Okay.
And looked at it. Oh yeah, it was, because like I remember like your law firm would pay for your class, and it was like this whole thing. Whereas like the second time, like I didn't have a job yet. I was just coming to New York to decide where I wanted to switch. And so I would just like bought a book and studied in the library. But I did have to study some specific New York stuff that was different.
Yeah, all the states are slightly different, just adds to the confusion, right?
Yeah. And like just, anyway. So, and then I took it in Albany because it was the timing I could take it in. And my mom came with me, and we like stayed in a hotel and went out for oysters at some place. It was kind of fun.
Maybe fun now. Probably was not fun then, I would imagine.
I don't know. I never minded these tests that much. So, but no, obviously like an all-day test isn't that fun. But anyway, it was kind of part of the journey.
Speaking of the journey, it will be, several weeks or even months for the people who took the bar exam last week before they find out if they passed or not. And so, I know it's been some time since you've taken it, but what advice would you offer to these anxious test takers as they wait to hear whether they passed the exam?
For this period, there's nothing you can do. So you should completely put it out of your mind and just, I remember when the first bar, I was in Brazil and they posted it online, and it was, 2004. So I didn't have a internet on my phone or anything like that. And so we're like in the internet cafe, like looking up our results, seeing if we passed. It would have changed if it would have been a bummer if I hadn't passed. But I think, first of all, between now and finding out, there's nothing you can do. So put it out of your mind. And then honestly, I've met multiple people who didn't pass the bar the first time in my career. And they just, study again and take it again and pass. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
It's a little bit inconvenient. And again, like not the most fun thing to spend your time on. But I also think employers understand. Eventually employers don't even know. No one asks you how many times you took the bar. But if you have a current employer, they just understand and help you pass it, take it again. So I'd say it's not as scary as some people make it out to be.
I guess the hard part is just the waiting to take it again, since they only offer it twice a year.
Right. It's not that convenient.
Not that convenient.
Yeah.
So your dad is an attorney, and he also served as a state judge in Massachusetts. Did he provide any inspiration for you to become an attorney?
Well, what's interesting is actually my dad and my mom are both attorneys.
Oh, I forgot that your mom's also an attorney.
Yeah, well, she took a totally different path, and it's been kind of interesting. I would have thought that anyway, it's been interesting kind of comparing how my paths have gone compared to theirs. My dad was like big law his whole career, financial litigator, then a judge, and he is actually now an arbitrator mediator at Jams, which is funny since I'm like right before he did that, I was getting into my alternative dispute resolution. So there's definitely like some parallels of our choices. However, I just, he was, in the office from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It was flying around doing trials and depositions and a lot of things that I didn't want to do schedule wise. And then also for me, and I think that's one of the reasons why I thought I was going to like litigation and being a trial lawyer. However, I just didn't find at least in New York at a larger firm, that you actually are a trial lawyer. And I didn't like that. And I think, and that's kind of from people I've spoken to outside New York, that's a little bit of like the reputation of New York, is that there's a lot of, especially at the more prestigious firms, there's a lot of litigators, and that you can have a 50-year-old partner who shows up in court and is kind of a disaster because they've basically never done it. They've been litigating and not being a trial lawyer. And I definitely in law school did not know the difference between the two. And now I feel like I do. And I don't like litigation. I think trial law actually still sounds fun and exciting, but the litigation part, like that, it just wasn't. It was way too slow, and I don't know, just wasn't for me.
You grind, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't the on your feet problem solving, depositions, standing in court, part of it that I would have imagined in law school. It was a lot more sitting in your office going through boxes of documents.
So how did your mom's career differ, and how did that inspire you?
So her career, she had me actually her third year of law school and was interviewing in 1977, 8-9 months pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And it was, everyone's like, what are you doing? So she was a trusted estates attorney. She also worked for, she was which is kind of sad. She was now I'm forgetting the organization. She, dedicated a big chunk of her career to being counsel for protecting abortion rights. And now we're back here again. But I remember being like in her office back then. But she definitely was, juggled more of the family and childcare. And so it took, she made choices about her career that were different than the choices my dad made. And she eventually just decided it was, too much of a jug. She didn't like the half and half, and she went back to being a teacher, which she had been before she went to law school. So, I think in more retrospect, I look back now and say, oh, I see why she made those choices, but I don't think forward thinking, I saw it as a guide of choices I would make. I just now understand them. Like, oh yeah, there's you miss a lot if you're working 60 hours a week of life that I like to do a lot of different things, not just one thing. And so I think that's kind of then how I've crafted my career, is to be able to be flexible, to do, interesting work, meet interesting people, but also, not just revolve around the office.
Exactly. And I'd like to talk to you a bit about how you crafted that career so that it can be flexible for you, and to have that full life. I know that we both started out as litigation associates in big law at Patterson Belknap. So when did you decide to leave to start your own firm, and did that play a role in how you craft your career going forward?
Yeah, well, one of the things that a couple things. So at Patterson Belknap, the area of law that I found the most interesting and that I was really enjoying working in was the intellectual property trademark litigation. And some of it was the corporate side, but most of it was litigation. But still, it was about intellectual property. So I knew that was an area that I did have interest in and wanted to pursue. To start, I actually looked at going in-house to different companies. I wasn't thinking that I was going to start my own firm. And then kind of to your point of even though Patterson is big law, the billable hour, even though it may demand a lot of you at times, you also have this kind of independence because there's no one looking at you between 9 and 6 saying what are you doing this minute, because your work was being either turned to the team you're working with knew what work you're doing, and then eventually even like the billable hour knew that you were I guess being a profitable employee if they were looking at it that way. And I was really kind of shocked when I was looking at these in-house departments, and it was just like so you put in for your doctor's appointment, and you put in for this, and you put in, and I just like as a personality freedom feel like I was just like, this is way too much for me. Like I cannot commit to that. I come and go when I please. I'm a grown up. I get my work done. I can't go into a micromanaging situation, which who knows if it is. Like sometimes like that the policies are really different once you're working within an organization. But that really pushed me to kind of being like, all right, how do I do this on my own terms? And also at the time I was getting a lot of phone calls because I have a lot of friends. My husband owns his own company. I have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurial and have different companies or moving up in different companies. And they were calling me at Patterson asking for different advice. And I couldn't really give it to them because you're not really supposed to unless you're a firm client. And at the same time, they weren't in any position to be a firm client because they were a tiny company or they were a startup, and it just didn't make economic sense. But that's what I wanted to. I wanted to work with these people. It was exciting. They were, I like to hear about their business ideas and what they were growing. So I wanted to. So that encouraged me to, be like, all right, I'm just going to go, give it a try, and it worked. Who knew?
Who knew? I think we both left the same year, within a year of each other.
I think I left in 2012 or 2011, I think.
Yeah, 2011 was with me. So yeah, we both started out, and that first year I was like, is this going to work?
Yeah, no, it was. It was like I was opening my office, after Labor Day, September 2011. And I remember we were with friends, and they were like, so what happens? You just like go and sit at a desk with your phone there, and you're just like, here I am. And I'm like, I guess, I don't really know. But it really did. It happened so quickly. It was just like, I think there's a big need for, and that's what I've seen from a lot of just the Patterson alumni that I know who are, all like, really smart, capable, practiced attorneys that don't need to charge, $1,000. I bet it's I don't even know the billing rates now at a big firm. I bet it was $1,000 when we left. I bet it's like $1,500 now.
That's so high.
An hour to, it was like, people need good legal advice and need someone that's like going to answer their call and like has the time to have a client who's $2,000 for the whole year. Like, that's fine with me. I'm happy, it doesn't really matter. Like the size of the case necessarily. I get to know people better, obviously, if I'm working with them a lot and over the long term, but I'm happy to have small clients too. And so I think that seems like that's a real need. People don't really know where to go for that.
No, I agree entirely. And I think that, it shows by how successful some former big law associates, or big law partners who've left and set up their own shop, how successful they've been. Just there's a need. And big law isn't the end all or be all, and doesn't actually serve all the clients that are out there, all the people that need help. There's a huge range of businesses and individuals that need lots of different types of legal advice.
Absolutely. And one of the things I also found, which I love being able to fill this space, is this, a lot of my clients who are female, who are, startup fashion designers or, what else do I have? I have food brands. They often start off with like my dad's friend. I got sent to somebody, and they then talk down to them like they were idiots, like, using all the jargon, like, you got your certificate of incorporation, and then you do this and all this stuff that sounds really scary and complicated, and it's not complicated at all. It's just, stupid legal compliance things that people have to do, and they'll apologize to me about not knowing about it and because they were made to feel stupid. And you're just like, you shouldn't know about this. You're creating like something totally different. This is why you have an attorney or an accountant to, do these details and give you a summary of it. Like, of course you don't know, everything that you need to do to, legally create a partnership or whatever it is. So that's kind of, I like to be be a younger woman. I guess not that younger anymore, but at least when I started, I was a younger woman. Now I'm just middle woman, but the accessible. And maybe people not feel bad that like there are no dumb questions, and there's like no one should be walking around with a head full of legal knowledge unless you are a lawyer.
Yeah, went to law school and you practiced.
Yeah, like it's not just fun information that you should know. So, and it changes, and by state and all of that stuff too. So that's been satisfying, I guess, as part of the process. Is to help
no, it's great that you're able to give that advice and help people actually bring their ideas to fruition. So, deciding you wanted to move from litigation to corporate IP, how did you go about taking what steps did you take to get from point A to B?
A couple things. So one was that litigating contracts, which was mainly what I had been doing at Patterson, some form of contract, so it was an IP licensing agreement, which, gave me more IP information, to just regular contracts. I had an understanding of agreements and contracts from a kind of hole poking problematic way. We'd all sat around and like dissected indemnification provisions before. So that actual transition to then drafting contracts wasn't, brain surgery. It wasn't that hard to switch over to then, know what issues actually are really important to look at, what things are, more negotiable, and what like risk counseling I could give my clients, saying, all right, if they're demanding this, like, okay, but you need to think about, these things could happen, and are you prepared for that? In addition to that, I also worked with a woman who was a corporate attorney. And so I just rented a space from her for my firm. I did some of her overflow work with her, and then she was wonderful and also like helped me with some specific, kind of corporate business law issues that I was unfamiliar with. And then beyond that, just my whole community has helped at different times. And I don't even know how I even know some of these people. Some of them, they're probably all through some level of Patterson connection, but, there's a tax attorney that I'm connected to somehow that, lives in Florida, who, when something is really, above my understanding, I'll send him something and hire him to review it. I have a more M&A, comfortable attorney, even though I've done some of that, but, I think it's like an ex-scat and M&A woman who looks at, reviews final deal documents for me and different things. So it's kind of a community of experts that, I've collected over time, and then we've done litigation together. So it's like when I need help beyond what I can provide, I just bring in people that, I've been able to vet and trust, and it makes it a lot easier for the client because I can kind of juggle the law part.
Right. And that you're working with someone that you trust and that you can have an easy working relationship with because you've already vetted them.
Exactly. And how to communicate with each other, and it works really well. So I guess that's the part that I feel like a big firm would try to like pitch as their like full service firm, but really all these small firms, it's the same thing. It's just through your relationships and work history with people, and people are happy to help each other out. Even lots of people are just for quick phone calls, not even for engagements. There's been questions, just things that come up, and everyone's always been so happy to just spitball like a potential issue.
People are actually happy to help, which is
a
big difference.
Yeah. And I think people like to, at some level are attorneys because they do find it interesting. So, so at some level, some of these issues are kind of just like theoretically interesting on like how would one go about, getting to some point that it needs to be.
Exactly.
Changed.
One thing I know that you've, area that is very interesting and really, I think, getting a lot of attention lately is mediation and sort of alternative dispute resolution. And I know that that's an area that you've gone into to develop some expertise there. So how did you make the decision to add that expertise, and what did you do to actually develop it?
So it was kind of similar to, leaving Patterson and different. So there's different times where I kind of start feeling a little like malaise about the whatever work I'm doing. And I think I'm a person that likes to change it up. And so, we already talked about the malaise. I felt at Patterson and switched it up to work more directly with creative clients and creatives. And then similarly with dispute resolution, I was feeling, and this was before pandemic, which is funny because now a lot of my dispute resolution is through the computer. All of it is through Zoom. But before the pandemic, it really came out of, I was like, I don't want to sit on my computer all day. I don't want to sit in this room. This isn't what I want to do. I need to be out in the world. I need to be with people. This is, what I want in my life is more, human interaction. So, so from there, I just started training. There's all these courses, you have to take all these courses for mediation. So I was doing a bunch of those trainings, which are weeks long. But then it goes into kind of an apprenticeship. I was at a community mediation center and it goes into an apprenticeship. And then we were put in, courts. And so I was in the Queen's Family Court, Small Claims Court, regular litigation, surrogates court, which I really enjoy, multiple days. And so that was then, and then now I'm doing Southern District of New York mediation training for the volunteer panel. I need to, and then community mediations where it's actually like not a legal problem, but it's a problem. Like those came up a lot during COVID, like neighbor issues. But anyway, so now it's all on Zoom, which I did. So I didn't escape my my computer goal, but it still is, has all the interpersonal in relationship and kind of, it's a kind of a mix of legal and social work kind of mentality a lot. And so I really enjoy it.
That's fantastic. Eventually we'll go back to in person, I think. I have a court appearance today.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's some things that are great about it being online. It's like the ability to get 6 people in a Zoom room is easier than getting 6 people in a conference room. So in some ways, it's really facilitated mediation in a way that can really kind of get everyone connected. So that part's good, but it's different than.
So you seem to really like mediation. You expressed that you really didn't like litigation. How do you compare the two, and what do you see the benefits of mediation versus litigation?
So first of all, the litigation part that I didn't like was the kind of like big, long litigation. So I think the trial lawyer advocacy part of, representing a client, I don't think I necessarily don't like that. I think that is actually closer to something that I like. But what I love about the mediation part is that you don't, because I also found, especially like in family settings and things, I would be very difficult for me to be a advocate, because I think what I like about mediation is that the whole idea is that like the experts are the parties. And so you, even if you are the hired attorney, like you're not the expert, you don't actually really know, you have all the information of what's happening in this family and what the children need, et cetera. So it'd be hard for me to be a family court advocate, because I just don't think I would know that what I was fighting for was necessarily right. I was just fighting for my client. So as a mediator, I love the challenge of instead just trying to get people to like go deeper than the conflict that they're talking about and really get more into like the motivations and the issues behind it, and really kind of like the humanity of, of everybody in the room, of like why they're there and how they got there. And it comes out in different ways and in different trickles, but it really, I think at the end of the day, people feel a lot more accomplished with the settlement or the mediation or the results than necessarily they would if a judge ruled on it. Or it's just something where it's like they have agency to kind of create the solution themselves. It's not always like that too. I mean, so that's like these are the cases that I find the most interesting are family surrogates, where it's a bunch of siblings, typically, figuring out inheritance and different things without a will, so a lot of like long-term emotional relationships that also probably have a future, not always, but often do have some level of future. Like the co-parents still have to co-parent, the siblings may have some sort of relationship. So I find that to be really important to kind of create a working relationship with each other so that it can move on into the future. It doesn't show up as much when it's the contractor dispute. That in that sense, my mediation is more, I feel like, just kind of like a public service to, it's like it's a volunteer opportunity to kind of relieve the courts of time sucking cases, because it's like no one's walking away going, oh, I feel heard that my contractor, that one doesn't really matter as much. That one's a little bit more transactional, where it comes down to some point being like, how much is it worth to not come back to this? How much is it worth to not miss a bunch of days of work and have to go to court and maybe lose and maybe win, or maybe get part of what you want, maybe get nothing. That's like a lot more kind of, let's just, you're asking for $60,000 and he's offering $15,000. Like something in here works, because none of this is worth anyone's time to continue like spending 2 years on. So I do have a lot of those too. And those are still, you can still like test out different tools of, communicating, but that's way more kind of like a negotiating mediation than the kind of emotionally ripe mediations that I really like. They're also scary because people are like, that's when people get mad and sad and all those things, but that's what makes kind of like, so feel really, they're the ones that at the end can't believe that they've finally let go of some of this baggage they're carrying around.
And that must, and it's must be rewarding in a different way too.
It is, yeah. That's where it's like social work and law mixing together, kind of, where it's, you feel like you're actually healing some wounds at some point, or watching themselves heal some wounds. You're just facilitating.
Do you plan to try to move from the sort of voluntary role to something more akin to JAMS or other professional mediation, paid mediation, or?
That's what I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
If it's like one of those things that like, this is how I like it and this is the best it can be, and why do I need to make it into a part of my paid career? And this is how I could balance it with my corporate work and then my volunteer mediation work. Or if I want to like keep growing in that area. So I'm figuring that out, but
it's good to have options, right?
Yeah, I know. Who knows what's in store?
That's great. So you mentioned, learning tools of negotiating. It's interesting. I actually tried to get my two teenager and 12-year-old daughter yesterday to negotiate who got the sunscreen that they both wanted. There's multiple bottles of sunscreen. They both want the same bottle, of course. And I often, rely on my training as an attorney to try to get them to reach a resolution, but I'm not always great at it. Are there any tools that you've learned from your mediation practice that you use with your own kids? I know you have two boys that are roughly, close in age.
Yeah, well, sometimes they'll catch me and they'll say, my husband too will say like, stop mediating me.
I get the don't lawyer me all the time.
Yeah. One of the tools that at least with my younger kid, and it's even actually important with my older, so I have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, is the mirroring response in mediation. When someone says something, instead of saying your opinion or reply to it, you basically just repeat it back to them. And I found that is really helpful. I mean, just like I think they really appreciate it, because I think a lot of the things that kids are telling us aren't necessarily wanting us to like fix it or tell them what we think. Because again, I don't really know. So instead it'll be something like, this happened today and my, so-and-so ripped up my artwork and then I got mad and whatever. I'm making this up. And so just to say like, oh, wow, that, so, Johnny ripped up your artwork. That would, and that made you really mad. I mean, you just literally say it back to them and they're like, yeah, you get me, and you're just like, yeah. But they really are. They're like, they feel like you're really listening. Anyway, it's one of the when I was practicing mediation, one of the recommendations, which was funny, and I think my kids probably loved it and they didn't know I was doing it, was the mirroring. So you like mirror everything. And so people to say like, watch a show and like do it after the show, because you're really supposed to like active listening, I guess, is the skill that it's called. And so it's like you're really active listening, and then you're able to. And so they would be telling me something so, terribly boring about Minecraft or something, and like how Minecraft works and what happened. And I'd be like, all right, I'm going to practice. So I'd be like listening. I'd be like walking to soccer practice or something, and I'm listening to this terribly idiotic story about Minecraft, according to me. But then at the end, I'd be like, wow, okay, so first you need to go into the blobosphere, and then you can do the endopearl, and then and they were like, yeah. And I'm like, so what I don't understand is then how do you do this, and they were like, oh my God. I mean, it was very funny. It was like I was practicing mediation skills and they thought I was just like joining them in their, their interest. But it works. It was good. I actually need to do that more. I've been off. They probably would appreciate it.
I love that story. Definitely going to try that with the kids.
It is. That's how to mediate in your life. I mean, it's really active listening and making people feel heard, which I guess is the underlying part of mediation, is that everyone wants to feel heard.
And it's also good parenting advice. So yeah, there you go.
This is life advice, really.
Good life advice. So speaking of life, you have to balance your husband and 2 kids and your law practice and also your voluntary mediation practice. How do you do it and balance your career goals and make the law basically serve you versus, feeling like you're constantly serving your career?
Yes. Well, I do think that's the upside of having your own practice, because, you could have 5 clients and you could have 100 clients, and you kind of can navigate that how you need to. And so I think that helps manage time. Every once in a while it jumbles up more than you would like at a certain moment, but I think that's any job or thing. But but it's been hard. I have to say, like during COVID, it was really hard because I was more flexible, because I don't have, big team meetings, because a lot of my clients, in some good ways, a lot of my clients were also kind of getting blown up. And so they were really, their business deals and their growth and expansion and all those things were on hold. So I did have more time, which was great and needed because I had 2 kids at home. But at the same time, I just totally became the like de facto parent, at-home parent to my kids. And my husband was like upstairs in the office, working, coming down at 6. So that was challenging. So there'll be times, so my kids will still say like, Mom, you're always on your computer. And I'm like, I'm actually really not always on my computer. I've made a pledge to not want to spend my life on the computer, actually. But you were around me when I had to do work. That was, it was like actual office time, which you just weren't supposed to see. You weren't supposed to be in the same place as me. You're supposed to be somewhere else, but instead you're with me. So that was hard, because it'd be like 1 minute, like I need to finish this one thing before we talk, and 30 seconds later, but Mom. So I know you lived, everyone's lived that at some point, if you had kids during the pandemic, but
it was hard.
Yeah, most like put to the challenge of how you juggle everything. And then now I'm kind of, rebuilding how I want my life to look. And I'm still a little like exploring 7 different paths of, like I said, if I want to go 100% into dispute resolution, if I want to grow my certain practice, if I want to just keep everything the same, if I want to become a farmer, all sorts of things.
That's one benefit of having a law degree, though, too, is that we can reimagine it. And it's not like you need to go back to school if you want to join a different practice area. You might need to read a few books or, ask a friend that practices in that area for some guidance, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel, really. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that I would say I actually I met with a student from my undergrad as a mentor question who was applying to law school and asking me about going to law school and things. And I had to say, I felt like she was going to be in a position where she had undergrad loans and she was going to take out enormous loans to go to law school. And I was hesitant about that for her because she wanted to do all this nonprofit stuff, and I was just like, I think my recommendation was for her to delay law school and work a little bit and see if that was the degree that she really needed to do what she wanted to do. Because I think the one negative holdback I'd say to law school would be, coming out with, $200,000+ of debt. And I'm not sure, like, unless you really want to be a big law attorney, that's a big chunk of money that you have to get paid off before, you start, doing whatever you want to do, if there is such a thing. So that's the part that I think I wish there was more kind of aid or scholarship for law school to do the, a million other interesting things other than big law. But,
yeah.
I mean, I think that's what you said before, like how career counselors kind of like usher you into big law, because it's like, that's what everyone wants to see. That's what, if you can, why wouldn't you? And I do think, because lawyers are typically so conservative in general, like having big law names on your resume, like forever does give you like some little stamp of approval that is valuable, but it's also kind of, BSC valuable. I mean, I'm sure you could learn amazing things from, not going to big law and going someplace else and getting, working hard and getting good skills. So
yeah, I mean, it really depends on who you worked with at that organization at what period of time as to what experience you're going to get, and
absolutely, yeah,
like what you're going to learn. So it's funny that it's sort of I can't say that word right now, homogeneously considered to be like a great seal of approval, when maybe you were stuck on a document review for the 3 years you were in big law and you never got to do anything.
Right, you never did anything, but they were like, oh, but this firm thought that you were good, so we're going to think you're good too. I mean, it's just like this risk averseness of lawyers. It's like, if someone else, gave you a thumbs up, okay, we feel better also giving you a thumbs up.
Right. Yeah, it's, I mean, I will say, I think I learned a lot in big law, but I don't think that, it's not an experience that everyone needs to have to be a great lawyer. I know many great lawyers that never set foot inside big law, and, you can really build your path the way that you want to. But I agree with you that it's a problem that law school is so expensive, because not only is it making people have to go to big law to be able to pay off their loans, as a female, especially trying to figure out when you have kids during that time period that seems to line up with when you have to be on the path for partnership, starts to make those questions and those decisions a lot harder, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think then that's the part that gets all the press too, about how it's hard to be, a woman lawyer, because they're not showing up in big numbers as partners at the big law firms. But that's just one tiny area of the law practice in its whole. So I think that one work model is difficult. But what I find amazing is that like once you leave big law and all these like, I forget what they, targeting billable hours were, but what is it? It was probably 40 hours a week of billable. I don't remember. Once you leave big law, you realize that without like enormous overheads and all those things, you can have like a wonderful, lucrative life billing 10 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And then you have all these other times to do. I mean, clearly anyone that knows, like billing 10 hours a week is working 20 hours a week, I guess, probably.
At least, but you're still, I agree with you. You can.
Then you're still, then you still have all these other times to do something totally different, volunteer, be a parent, be an entrepreneur, be a writer. I mean, there's so many. So I think in that sense, it can work for you so wonderfully. It's just the like heavy numbers of the big firms that make it crushing.
Yeah, the law school debt can be difficult. I know that I was careful to pay off my law school debt before I left big law, and I'm so glad that I did that. It just relieves a lot of the pressure from having to
absolutely
take on. You don't want to have the pressure to take on cases that you don't want to take on, right? I mean, that's also part of it. I think it's more important when you're a small law firm, especially.
Yeah.
Okay, I have last 3 questions for you. To not take up the rest of your day, because you and I could speak for hours.
I know, this has been such an easy conversation.
We've done that before, and we'll do it again hopefully soon in person. But last 3, these are my rapid fire questions, and we'll see how it goes. If you couldn't be an attorney, what career would you choose?
Oh my, that's an impossible rapid fire question. I always thought I would like some level of like production, but I know very little about it. But I like project-based ideas where you'd be like on producing a movie, producing an event, producing, something like that, where you're just like getting something done. Like, but not even tethered to a medium necessarily. It could be event planning. It could be movies, film, plays, TV shows. But yeah, getting something like all that like frenetic work, a campaign, all that like big, fast work, but then with a start and an end. I really like.
I could see you doing that. I can picture that. So that's a
yeah.
good answer.
That always sounded fun.
What is the one thing you wish you knew when you graduated law school that you know now?
I would say to make sure to push yourself to be learning all the time and to be curious about the work around you. And I mean, they used to say this to us all the time, so I guess it's not like they kind of be like an active participant in your career, which they did always say that when we were. It always felt like so lame and boring, but there is something about just just like keep, which I guess I did. I just felt like there was like some parts that were delayed. Like I probably should have made a switch, before I made a switch. But maybe you always feel that way when you look back. Like there has to be that kind of like dead period of all that transitioning happening in your head before you're ready to do it. But that would be kind of like the keep going forward, which I guess I did. So I don't know if that's really, that's good advice.
No, I think that's great advice. I agree. I mean, I guess it goes to, you never know what your career is going to exactly look like, but keep looking forward and sort of making sure that you're keeping your eyes open as to what you could be doing.
Yes.
Future, right.
Yes. And I guess the I don't know if it's a maxim or an idiom but the saying that, I remember my parents used to say this, they said it in law school, but it's like but I do think it's important, is that, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and takes a moment to ruin it. And I do think that's one of those things of just like always, even when I was, dying at Patterson and like it was time for me to leave, I was so bored. That was one of the things that rushed me out the door. I was like, I got to get out of here before I actually start doing bad work. Because I don't want, because I was feeling that way. I had to like motivate myself to to do the work. I was like, I had to like drum myself up. I'd be like, oh, like so avoiding it. And I'd be like, okay, I have to go. and I better go soon because I'm going to start doing bad work. And then I don't want that attached to my name. Like, whatever I do, I want it to be someone goes, okay, well, she's a good lawyer, or she's a smart person, or she's a thoughtful person, because I don't know, that's all you have, really. And you do keep these relationships forever. And it does, it is a huge community, but it feels very small when when you're a part of it. So
that's fantastic. And would you recommend a law career to your children?
I would recommend it to children in general.
Just not yours.
I'm not sure if either of my kids, like my older son is a terrible reasoner. I'm not sure what's going on, but his arguments are just terrible. So I'm not sure if it's for him or if it's a stage, but they literally don't add up. Like, I'll just stand there and be like, I don't even understand your point. Like, it's just, so that hopefully is just a stage of development, but I'm not sure if it's for him. And then my younger son is just so creative that I'm not sure if law would satisfy him. But in general, yes. I mean, I would say go to the best law school that you can. I would say take out, if you can't go to a top law school, then you find a scholarship, because if you don't go to a top law school, you can't owe a ton of money. You're digging yourself in a grave. If you can go to a top law school and have to, take debt, then, really think about what you want to do on the other side, and how, really crunch the numbers, which I don't think people do, and see, okay, this is going to take me 5 years of doing X. Do I still want to do this? Mm-hmm. Maybe so. Maybe you're still going to learn something, but also maybe not. And maybe it's going to take you more than 5 years. Maybe it's going to take you 15 years, whatever it is. I think that's a big problem of people jump, you're like young and you jump into it, and people are throwing loans at you, and you're like, oh, this is so easy. So that would be my recommendation to children in general. But yeah, I think that even with, what they're saying, with smart contracts and all these different tools that I think are going to really help are going to take over the legal industry, I think actually really going to help it. I think it's going to really equalize some of the really, really basic, not really interesting, important stuff. But there'll always be, trained legal thinkers. I think that it's always going to be important. And if that's more, if it changes exactly your day-to-day work as the future goes on, maybe. But I think I think it's a valuable education, and that there would be nothing lost by getting it, except going into severe debt. Yeah, but if you can figure that part out, I think I would recommend everyone go to law school.
Oh, that's great. Everyone who has interest, right? Yeah. Yes.
It was,
This has been amazing. I know we could keep talking for a long time, but we also have work to do. So it was great chatting with you, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rosanne. It was so nice to see you. Thank you for having me. It was an honor.
You've been listening to Success in Brief with your host, Rosanne Felicello. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others. You can catch prior episodes at www.felicellolaw.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.